Hey guys, Betrayal League starting today, and we got all the info that we need, balance changes, new skills and stuff, passive skill tree. So I wanted to briefly review all of my builds that I did during Delve League, see what is changing, what needs to be updated, and which builds are even worth doing, because as you know I do a lot of testings and my builds are usually not for most players. It is mostly just to bring some attention to certain mechanics, items, skills, interactions. So let's start, and I will add link to this playlist in video description, and I will also add links to builds that I think are really good, or at least I really enjoyed them, and also a couple links to the videos that I think are really fun and just enjoyable to watch. So my first build during Delve League was with Static Strike, because Static Strike got reworked and I wanted to play with it, and I chose to use dual Mjolnirs as Guardian. This build was surprisingly good in Delve, really good clear speed, really cheap. The only expensive items was 2 Mjolnirs. I was using Arc and Shock now, which did not change. In fact, Mjolnir got buffed because the cooldown was 250 milliseconds to trigger spells, and now it's 150 milliseconds, so you can trigger about 6.6 times per second, up from 4 times per second. After that build, I did try to play with the Primordial Chain and building Golemancer, but for some reason I just didn't like the playstyle. I know that golems are still very strong and still very popular, and I heard that Ice Golem is really good for clear speed, especially in Delve, but other than that I can't really say much about this build, and I probably wouldn't recommend, mostly because golem jewels are still a bit expensive. Next, I decided to play with Warcry's Berserker, because Warcry's got, well, buffed I guess, because we got a bunch of Warcry's node from the passive skill tree, and I wanted to play with Debion's Dirge Axe, which synergized with Warcry's, but every time I try Berserker I am disappointed because of how squishy it feels. Berserker feels like the only class with serious drawback. Taking 10% increased damage is a big deal, and while I did like the playstyle, especially with the charge dash, but in the end I never really completed that build. So I would probably not recommend that build. Namahu's Flame Axe is just better in almost every way, and don't take Berserker, at least not at the start of the league. Next build, I did want to play with Bleed plus Poison Pathfinder, since Pathfinder along with Guardian got slight changes to its couple ascendancy nodes. So I did manage to craft a bow with fossils, which improves damage with Bleed and Poison, and I was using Scorch Arrow. The damage is still not properly calculated in Path for building, and the build was mostly for testing, it's not really recommended. Next build, Scorching Ray Casual Channeling Volatile Dead. I got this idea from another streamer, Celtank. I also wanted to play with the new Soul Rest staff, which summoned phantasms when you consume a corpse, and Volatile Dead does trigger that. Also, there will still be a trick for Soul Rest staff. If you place Summon Phantasm on kill support gem inside the staff, you basically double the amount of phantasms that you summon. And I always felt like that's a bug and it's not intended. But even if that's not gonna work anymore, it's still a very viable build, and I would say it's one of the most pleasant builds that I did during the Delve. And it also seems that Energy Shield is getting slight buff, both in the passive skill tree and in some items. The main reason why I really like this build is because, well, it is quite tanky occult. It's not really tanky as in mitigation, but it just felt really safe playing with it. Blasphemy with Temporal Chains and some Curse effectiveness makes enemies very slow around you. I even rated this build 9 out of 10, and the only reason why it's not 10 out of 10 is because it did lack damage in the very end game. But you can definitely still do Shaper with this, possibly even Uber Elder. You're just not gonna face roll those bosses in a couple seconds. Next build, I did want to play with Dread Surge Axe and see if it's an actual endgame weapon, and I chose to do a crit version, Scion Assassin Jugger, which may or may not be better than a non-crit version with Elemental Overload. And I did use Infernal Blow, and while the clear speed was pretty good and it felt pretty good using Infernal Blow, but in the end it just didn't have enough damage. You could easily get more damage with good crafted rare weapon. I was also using a stat stick dagger, which is no longer possible, and you could still dual wield Dread Surge, but it's still not really advisable, so I would not recommend this build. Next build, Inquisitor with Stormcall and Lightning Spire Trap for single target. I was using Dust Dawn Staff, which by the way does get a slight buff, But overall I think I just took a bit wrong approach for this build, and it did feel kind of squishy, and the damage was a bit unreliable because you have to maintain power charges with the Orb of Storms. And while Lightning Spire Trap does have very good damage, but it's so random and the enemy must not be moving. I was also trying to get a block to not be that squishy, but in the end it just was not reliable. I'm kind of torn about this build. I probably would not recommend it, but it's not really bad. Next build, Blast Rain Raider. I simply miss playing with Raider, and I wanted to play with the new reworked Blast Rain. And this build I did enjoy quite a lot. I may have enjoyed it even more if I was a fan of buffs, which I'm not. Nothing really changed about this build. It has decent damage, okay-ish clear speed, decent defenses, not really expensive, but it could be tankier, could have more damage if you throw more currency in it. If you don't mind playing a bit of meta things, then I would probably recommend this build. Next, very deadly dead build, Cast on Death build, fully meme build, not intended for, well, for playing, just a fun video. Next, Reflect Totems with Reverse Knockback and Flame Totem, with Sire of Shard and Malachai's Artifice Ring, which does get buffed. But overall I think this build is not really recommended. It does have very limited damage potential, but it can still be fun. Next build, I wanted to experiment with the Brain Rattler, also using Lightning Strike, non-crit Inquisitor, aspect of the Spider from Venomous Thief Gloves to slow enemies, Brain Rattle to slow even more, and then Tempt Chain to slow enemies even more. So that was my focus, and the clear speed was really impressive. I really enjoyed the clear speed, but in the end the single target was kind of lacking. Also not really cheap because it does require certain items, so I would probably not recommend this, especially for the league start, but it is still fun, slowing enemies to extreme. Next build again with Sire of Shards, this time Deadeye with Cremation. And this one was kind of weird. It's a mix between Life and ES build, with Venomous Gloves, Boots and Helmet, Life and Energy Shield on hit from spells, and also Deadeye gets plus extra projectile and a lot of AoE, a bit of critical chance for anything, as long as it is projectile. And again, I was trying to slow enemies down, and that was my only kind of defensive layer, and all that slow makes enemies stand in the cremation hit zone for longer period, so they get damaged more, but in the end it's not really recommended. It did turn out kind of bad. The damage was alright, it just felt squishy. And the ES and Life on hit was not really worth with the cremation. It would work better with Blighting, which does hit more frequently, so I just would not recommend this build. Next, I wanted to kind of revisit Ice Spear, and like 2 days once I started that build, they announced the Ice Spear rework, so I kind of abandoned that build, so there's nothing much to talk about that. But Ice Spear in this new league is looking really hot, or should I say cool. So I remade that build into Elemental Hit using Tripanon with all elements and using Elemental Equilibrium, Scion, Jugger, Inquisitor, and trying to get a lot of crit multiplier, so I was using Madeline's Fallacy Amulet, which does give a lot of crit multiplier, but reduces the crit chance. However, that doesn't matter for the Tripanon, because you always have 100% critical chance, but you still need to hit enemies. And that's why I took Jugger to get a lot of accuracy and some tankiness. It was quite interesting playing with all 3 different elements and using Elemental Equilibrium, but in the end the mace is very slow, so it didn't feel very good to play with it. So I would probably not recommend this build. Next build, very fast, Freezing Pulse Trickster. And once you name something turbo, there's always gonna be people who say, "Oh, it's not fast enough, I got faster." But for me, this build felt really good, really fast, really pleasant to play with. It is a CI build, so it's not maybe for everyone. But other than that, I would definitely recommend this build. Next, cast on Crit Poet's Pen Juggernaut. I am not a fan of Poet's Pen, so I still wanted to play something with Poet's Pen. I didn't want to do it normally, so I just added cast on Crit, which is more challenging to build. Now, while the most popular Poet's Pen build did get nerfed in a different way, in not direct way, but this build got buffed, because cast on Crit cooldown got buffed quite a lot, from 0.5 seconds cooldown to 0.15 seconds. So from being able to trigger only 2 times per second, you will be able to trigger over 6 times per second. And if you invest into cooldown recovery speed items, you could get it close to 9, maybe even up to 10 triggers per second. But of course you would want to use skills like Barrage, because each projectile from Barrage does roll a critical strike separately. And I think cast on Crit builds are gonna be pretty meta this league, and not necessarily with Poet's Pen, just overall. It's not gonna be like all days with cast and crit, but it's still gonna be pretty strong. I'm not sure if I would recommend this build because I'm not sure about the price of this build anymore. Maybe not as a league start, or maybe just without poet span. Next, I wanted to experiment with cast while charging crit Discharge. However, I didn't really like the playstyle with it, so I didn't do a lot of testings, and people got upset about that I didn't test this and that and that and that. And I do agree with some of the criticism, but even then, I would still not recommend doing that build. Well, it wasn't a full build guide video, it was just a quick test video. Next, to punish myself for that cast on crit discharge build, I decided to play with Flame Dash, and I wanted to defeat Shaper with that. Only Flame Dash. Ignite based Flame Dash, with double damage over time, I guess. I'm not gonna spoil the results, but it's a meme build. And I would say that's one of the more funny videos. And the best laugh is at the end, so make sure you watch that. Next, I wanted to prepare myself for the upcoming league, Ignite based fireballs. In my opinion, Ignites are very good for league start, they do a very good job at clear speed. Single target is not the most amazing, but you don't really need a lot of investment for that. You could even defeat Uber Elder with Ignites fireball, maybe not with the exact build that I did. It's more just for the league start for clear speed. You can also make it pretty tanky with Calm's Heart, and I was using Searing Touch Staff, which is not really needed. You can use something else like +3 staff if you can get it. And I'm gonna adapt this build and play with Armageddon, possibly with Ignites. I'm not really sure if Ignites are gonna be good with Armageddon. So I will most likely try and do like a hybrid hit and Ignite build. Not really focusing on hit, but also not really focusing on Ignites fully. And if it doesn't work, then just go back to fireballs, I guess. So yeah, I would recommend this build for the league start. Of course, with cheaper items you don't need all that damage for league start, and you can slowly improve your items and get to the end game. So yeah, that's basically gonna be my league starter. Next build, Necro, pure physical skeletons build. This one did exceptionally well, and I even managed to defeat Uber Elder for the first time. The damage potential is really high. I did manage to get over 4 million Shaper DPS, and it's possible to get even more. However, this build is not cheap, but still I would recommend it for the league start, because skeletons are really good for league start. They have very high damage without too much investment. All you need is Tabla or +2 Tabla. And later on I got 6-link Chabert Cern, which makes skeletons tankier, and in my opinion making skeletons tankier is worth it, because they are very squishy, and if they die very fast then they can't do all that damage. So in a sense making them tankier makes them do more damage. So yeah, this build gets a big thumbs up. And last build of the league that I did was Explosive Traps. Now, my main issue with Explosive Traps was that it has pretty bad clear speed, and since Cluster Trap got nerfed, and it's almost even worse than Multi-Trap now. With Cluster Trap you throw extra 2 traps, with Multi-Trap you also throw extra 2 traps, but Multi-Trap has less multiplier on the support jump, so I don't know, I probably would not recommend it. The damage is really good, and despite statistics getting half of the damage nerfed, you can still do it just fine. In fact, you don't even need the Elder or Shaper so-called statistics anymore. You can just use a good dagger with spell crit multi, spell damage. So the build should still work just fine. It's just the clear speed is quite bad, even for me. I think I'm not even gonna touch traps in the Betrayal League. And that is all the builds that I did. Well, I think I did a couple more that I didn't even do videos about. But in Betrayal there are so many new things, so many new build possibilities. So I'm very excited and very looking forward to trying new builds, experimenting, making meme builds, and just having a blast. I would also like to thank everyone who's watching my videos, commenting, and even criticism, sharing your own ideas, discussing, and well, just reacting to my funny videos. Also, making videos and streaming is my only job, so I want to especially thank all the patrons. Some of them have supported me for over 1 year now, and it did help me a lot through the tough times, especially during Apocalypse, Apocalypse 2.0, Apocalypse 3.0. Actually, that was one of the main reasons why I did start streaming, and I didn't really think that people would be interested in watching my streams, but turns out, well, you never know until you try. So again, thank you all for watching, thank you for the support, and I'll see you in the Betrayal League.